Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the research station, feeling the vibrations of the massive creature moving in the containment bay below. 3 months she had been assigned to Project Draconis, and still the sight of the dragon made her breath catch in her throat. The creature was nothing like the mythical beasts from Earth's ancient stories. This dragon was real, alien, and magnificent in ways that defied human imagination. Its scales shifted between deep emerald and midnight blue, each one the size of a dinner plate and harder than titanium. When it moved, which was rarely these days, the scales caught the artificial light and threw it back in prismatic rainbows that danced across the reinforced walls of its prison. Dr. Marcus Webb, the project's lead xenobiologist, joined Sarah at the observation window. His weathered face showed the strain of months spent trying to understand their captive. "Still no change in its behavior patterns," he said, consulting his tablet. "Minimal food consumption, almost no movement except for basic life functions. The psychological evaluation team thinks it's entered some kind of depression state." Sarah watched the dragon's massive head rest against the floor of the containment bay. Its eyes, each one larger than her torso, remained closed. The creature hadn't looked up at the observation windows in weeks. "Have you considered that maybe it's not depressed?" she asked. "Maybe it's mourning." Webb raised an eyebrow. "Mourning what? We've treated it humanely since the capture. Better than humanely, actually. Climate-controlled environment, fresh food, medical care when needed." "A cage is still a cage, Marcus." Sarah kept her voice gentle but firm. "Look at the scan results from when we first brought it aboard. Remember how its bio-readings spiked every time we moved it further from the crash site." The dragon had been discovered on Kepler 442c, a world the human colonization fleet had marked for terraforming. What should have been a routine survey mission had turned into first contact when the massive creature was found trapped in the wreckage of what appeared to be a spacecraft. The ship's design was unlike anything in human databases, all flowing curves and organic-looking metal that seemed grown rather than manufactured. The rescue operation had taken 6 days. The dragon had been conscious but badly injured, one of its wings crushed beneath a section of hull plating. At first, the survey team had approached with weapons ready, expecting a wild animal. Instead, they found intelligent eyes watching them and what could only be described as gratitude when they began cutting away the debris. But something had changed during the transport back to the research station. The dragon's initial curiosity about its human rescuers had gradually faded into withdrawal. Now it barely responded to external stimuli, and the medical team was growing concerned about its declining health. "The crash site," Sarah murmured, pieces clicking together in her mind. "Marcus, what if the ship wasn't just transportation? What if it was home?" Webb looked skeptical. The vessel was heavily damaged. Structural analysis suggested it had been adrift for years, maybe decades. Life support was completely offline when we found it. "But what if that wasn't the dragon's ship originally?" Sarah pulled up the survey reports on her own tablet, scrolling through xenoarchaeology findings. "Look at these readings from the planet's surface. The team found traces of a settlement near the crash site. Old traces, but definitely artificial structures. The evidence was there in the geological surveys and atmospheric analysis. Kepler 442c showed signs of previous habitation. Not human, obviously, but someone had lived there. Someone had built cities and possibly even spaceports, all of it abandoned long before the human survey team arrived." "You're suggesting the dragon was a colonist?" Webb asked. "That we found the last survivor of a failed settlement attempt?" Sarah watched the creature's slow, steady breathing. Each exhale created a small cloud of condensation in the cooler air near the floor of its containment bay. "Not just a colonist. Look at the size of that ship, the complexity of its systems. This wasn't some random passenger. I think we rescued someone important. Maybe their leader, their captain there?" She paused, searching for the right word. "Their guardian." The implications were staggering. If Sarah was right, then the dragon wasn't just an alien animal they had saved from a crash. It was a sentient being who had watched its people's colony fail, who had possibly spent years or even decades alone in the wreckage of their civilization, and who now found itself imprisoned by the very species that had tried to help. Webb was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the dragon. "The medical scans did show unusual neural activity," he admitted. "Brain patterns that suggested complex thought processes, emotional responses. We've been treating it like a sophisticated animal, but if it's actually sapient." Then we've been holding a prisoner of war, Sarah finished. Someone who probably understands every word we're saying through the translation algorithms, who knows exactly what happened to their people, and who thinks we're just another conquering species come to claim what's left. The dragon's head moved slightly, and for a moment Sarah thought it might look up at them. But it only shifted position, settling its massive bulk more comfortably against the floor. The movement was careful, deliberate. There was nothing animal about it. "We need to try a different approach," Sarah said. "If this being is mourning the loss of its people, its home, then maybe what it needs isn't medical treatment or behavioral conditioning. Maybe it needs acknowledgement, recognition, respect." Webb closed his tablet with a soft click. "The review board won't like it. They've already classified the dragon as a xenobiological specimen. Reclassifying it as a sentient being would require a complete restructuring of the project protocols." Sarah knew he was right. Project Draconis had been designed as a scientific study of alien biology. The funding, the personnel assignments, the mission parameters, all of it was built around the assumption that they were dealing with a particularly intelligent animal. Admitting they might have misjudged the situation would mean admitting they had been holding a sapient being against its will for months. But looking at the motionless form in the containment bay below, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The dragon's health readings had been declining steadily, not from any physical ailment the medical team could identify, but from something deeper, something that couldn't be treated with medications or environmental adjustments. "I want to try something," she said finally. "Give me clearance to enter the containment bay." Webb's eyes widened. "Sarah, that's completely against protocol. We don't know how it might react to direct human contact. It's never shown aggression, but a creature that size could kill you accidentally just by moving wrong." "It won't hurt me." Sarah wasn't sure how she knew that, but the certainty was absolute. "Look at it, Marcus. Really look. That's not the posture of a predator or even a wild animal. That's someone who's given up, someone who's lost everything and doesn't see any point in fighting anymore." Webb studied the dragon's form, taking in the careful way it had positioned itself to avoid any contact with the walls or observation windows. Even in its despair, the creature was being considerate of its environment and its captors. "What are you planning to do?" Sarah didn't have a complete answer to that question. She only knew that conventional approaches weren't working, and that sometimes the most important discoveries came from taking carefully calculated risks. "I want to try treating it like what I think it really is. Not a specimen or a test subject, but a person. Someone who deserves respect, dignity, and maybe even friendship." The research station hummed around them, a constant reminder of human technological achievement. But looking down at the dragon, Sarah couldn't help feeling that their technology meant very little if they couldn't recognize the worth of another intelligent being when it was right in front of them. "I'll need to clear it with the security team," Webb said slowly. "And medical will want to monitor everything. But Sarah, if you're right about this, if we really have been holding a sentient being prisoner, then we owe it more than just an apology. We owe it justice." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through the possibilities. If the dragon was truly sapient, then everything about Project Draconis would have to change. But more than that, it might open the door to humanity's first real communication with an alien intelligence, not as conquerors or captors, but as equals. The dragon's breathing remained steady and deep. Somewhere in that massive form was a mind that might hold the secrets of an entire civilization, the memories of a people who had reached for the stars and found tragedy instead of triumph. Sarah only hoped it wasn't too late to make things right. As she and Webb left the observation deck to begin the complicated process of getting authorization for direct contact, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the dragon knew they were there, that it understood more about their conversations than they realized, and that somewhere in its ancient, alien mind, it was waiting to see if humanity was capable of something more than just scientific curiosity. The real test wasn't going to be whether they could communicate with the dragon. It was whether they could prove themselves worthy of its trust. The authorization process took 18 hours of heated debate, emergency committee meetings, and 3 separate psychological evaluations of Captain Chen herself. Dr. Webb had to call in favors from colleagues across 3 different departments, while Sarah spent the time preparing for what might be humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien species. She studied every piece of data they had collected about the dragon's behavior, looking for patterns that might indicate communication preferences. The creature had never shown aggression, but it had demonstrated clear preferences. It avoided bright lights, seeming to prefer the softer illumination that mimicked its home world's sunset colors. It positioned itself carefully within the containment bay, always maintaining what appeared to be respectful distance from the observation areas. Most telling of all, the dragon had never attempted to test the strength of its containment. Security analysis confirmed that a creature of its size and apparent strength could easily damage the barriers if it chose to. But it never had. Not once in 3 months had it shown any sign of trying to escape. "That's not the behavior of a captured animal," Sarah explained to the review committee during her final clearance hearing. "That's the behavior of someone who understands their situation and is choosing cooperation over confrontation. Someone who's waiting to see what kind of people we really are." Admiral Harrison, the station commander, leaned back in his chair at the head of the conference table. "Captain Chen, I want to make something absolutely clear. If you're right about this creature's intelligence, then this contact represents humanity's first diplomatic meeting with an alien species. Everything you say and do down there will be recorded and analyzed by xenopsychology teams for decades to come." Sarah nodded. "I understand the responsibility, sir, but I also understand that we might only get one chance at this. The creature's health indicators continue to decline. Dr. Webb believes we have perhaps days before its condition becomes irreversible." Dr. Elizabeth Torres, the station's xenopsychologist, spoke up from across the table. "Captain, have you considered what you'll do if the being reacts poorly to direct contact? Your safety protocols are minimal at best." "The safety protocols are minimal because I don't believe the dragon poses a physical threat," Sarah replied. "But there are other risks. If I'm wrong about its intelligence level, or if I misread its intentions, we could damage any possibility of future communication. We could also cause it additional psychological trauma." Admiral Harrison studied the medical reports spread across his tablet screen. "Dr. Webb, what's your professional assessment of the risks versus potential benefits?" Webb cleared his throat. "Medically speaking, the creature is dying, not from any treatable condition, but from what can only be described as despair. Traditional veterinary approaches have failed completely. Captain Chen's proposed contact represents our last viable option for helping it. And if she's right about its sapience, then we've been accidentally committing a crime against sentience for 3 months, and we have a moral obligation to make amends." Webb's voice was steady, but Sarah could see the weight of that possibility in his expression. The committee voted to approve the contact attempt with a narrow margin. Sarah would be allowed into the containment bay under strict monitoring, with emergency extraction protocols ready to activate at the first sign of danger. The entire interaction would be recorded from multiple angles, with real-time analysis by the best xenopsychology and linguistics experts the fleet could provide. 2 hours later, Sarah stood outside the containment bay entrance, wearing a lightweight environmental suit that would protect her from any alien pathogens while allowing maximum freedom of movement. The suit's communication systems would broadcast everything she said to the monitoring team, while sensors would track the dragon's responses in unprecedented detail. "Remember," Dr. Tor's voice crackled through her earpiece, "if you're right about its intelligence, then it's probably been listening to our conversations through the translation systems. It may understand more human language than we realize." Sarah took a deep breath and placed her hand on the access panel. The heavy door slid open with a soft hiss, and she stepped into the dragon's world. The containment bay was much larger than it appeared from the observation windows, easily the size of an aircraft hangar. The dragon lay in the center of the space, its massive form still and silent. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent than Sarah had imagined. Each scale was a work of art, catching and reflecting light in complex patterns that seemed almost like writing. The dragon's breathing was slow and measured, but Sarah noticed that its nearest eye had opened slightly when she entered. It was watching her, evaluating this new development without moving its head or otherwise acknowledging her presence. "Hello," Sarah said softly, settling herself on the floor about 20 meters from the dragon's head. "My name is Sarah, Sarah Chen. I'm here because I think we've made a mistake and I'd like to try to fix it." The dragon's eye opened fully, revealing an iris that swirled with colors Sarah had no names for. The intelligence behind that gaze was unmistakable, ancient and profound in ways that made Sarah feel like a child trying to talk to a philosopher. We found you on Kepler 442c, she continued, keeping her voice gentle and respectful. We pulled you from the wreckage of your ship, and we brought you here because we wanted to help, but I don't think we understood what kind of help you really needed. The dragon's head moved slightly, just enough to bring both eyes to bear on Sarah's position. The movement was careful and deliberate, designed not to startle her. Even in its apparent illness, the creature was being considerate of her safety. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. You've been taking care of us, haven't you? Even though we've kept you locked up, even though you probably don't understand why we won't let you go, you've been protecting us from yourself, making sure not to accidentally hurt anyone. The dragon's chest rose and fell in what might have been a sigh. When it breathed out, Sarah caught a scent like cinnamon and ozone, alien but not unpleasant. The creature's massive head lowered until it was resting on the floor again, but its eyes remained fixed on her. The settlement on Kepler 442c, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. That was your people's home, wasn't it? We found the archaeological evidence. Cities, infrastructure, all of it abandoned. How long were you alone down there? For a moment, Sarah thought she had pushed too far. The dragon's eyes closed, and its breathing became even slower and more labored. But then something extraordinary happened. The creature began to make sounds, low harmonic tones that resonated through Sarah's chest and seemed to carry emotional weight far beyond their physical vibrations. Are you trying to tell me something? Sarah asked, leaning forward slightly. I wish I could understand. We have translation systems, but they're designed for verbal languages. What you're doing, it's more like music, isn't it? The dragon's eyes opened again, and this time Sarah was certain she saw recognition there. Recognition and something that might have been hope. My people sing too, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger as an idea began to form. Not the same way you do, but when we're sad, when we've lost someone important, we use music to remember them, to honor them. Sarah began to hum softly, a melody her grandmother had taught her years ago. A song about loss and remembrance, about love that persists even after separation. The tune was simple but profound, carrying the weight of human experience in its familiar cadences. The dragon's reaction was immediate and startling. Its head lifted from the floor, and the harmonic tones it had been making shifted to match Sarah's melody. Not perfectly, but close enough that the two sounds created a harmony that sent chills down Sarah's spine. Oh, she whispered, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. You do understand. You've been listening to us, learning our music, our patterns, and you're trying to share yours with us. The dragon's song continued, weaving around Sarah's simple melody with complexities that spoke of a musical tradition far older and more sophisticated than anything in human culture. But underneath the alien harmonics, Sarah could hear something unmistakably universal. Grief, loss, the profound sadness of a being who had watched everything it loved disappear. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she kept humming, kept providing the simple human foundation for the dragon's elaborate musical expression. Through the shared song, she began to understand what the creature had endured. Years alone in the wreckage of its ship, watching the abandoned cities of its people slowly succumb to time and weather, waiting for rescue that never came, hopping for a purpose that had been lost when its civilization fell. When the song finally ended, the silence in the containment bay felt different, less empty, more expectant. The dragon was watching Sarah with what she could only describe as gratitude, its massive form no longer radiating the despair that had characterized its behavior for months. You're not just mourning your people, Sarah realized aloud. You're mourning your duty to them. You were their protector, weren't you? Their guardian, and when they were gone, you didn't know what to do with yourself. The dragon's head moved in what looked remarkably like a nod, subtle but unmistakable. Sarah stood slowly, her heart racing with the magnitude of what was happening. What if I told you that your duty doesn't have to be over? What if there were new people who could use a guardian's protection? People who are young and inexperienced and making mistakes, but who are trying to do better. The dragon's eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that was both thrilling and terrifying. Sarah felt as though she was being evaluated, measured against standards she couldn't fully comprehend but desperately wanted to meet. Humanity isn't perfect, she continued, her voice growing stronger. We're explorers and scientists, but we're also warriors when we need to be. We make mistakes, but we try to learn from them. And right now, we're alone out here among the stars, just like you were alone on that planet. The dragon began to sing again, but this time the melody was different. Instead of grief and loss, Sarah heard something that might have been curiosity. Question, possibility. "Would you like to meet the rest of us?" Sarah asked. Not as a prisoner or a specimen, but as an honored guest, as someone whose knowledge and experience could help us avoid the mistakes that cost your people their future. The dragon's massive head lowered until it was level with Sarah's position. And then, with infinite gentleness, it extended its neck and touched its forehead to her outstretched hand. The contact sent a shock through Sarah's entire body, not electrical but emotional. For a brief moment she felt what the dragon felt. The weight of millennia, the responsibility of guardianship, the profound loneliness of being the last of its kind. But underneath it all, she felt something new emerging. Purpose. Hope. The possibility of connection with beings who might be worth protecting. When the contact ended, the dragon pulled back and looked at Sarah with eyes that sparkled with renewed interest. Its posture had changed, no longer the dejected slump of a creature waiting to die. Now it sat with the alert attention of someone who had found a reason to keep living. "Welcome to humanity," Sarah whispered, still feeling the echo of their brief mental connection. "I think you're going to fit right in." The transformation was remarkable to witness. Within hours of Sarah's first contact with the dragon, the creature's entire demeanor had changed. Medical scans showed improvement in brain activity, cardiovascular function, and metabolic rates. But more importantly, the dragon began to interact with its environment again. Dr. Webb stood beside Sarah at the observation window, watching as the dragon carefully examined a series of human artifacts they had introduced into the containment bay. Books, musical instruments, examples of human art and technology, all arranged in a careful display that represented humanity's cultural achievements. "Look how it handles everything," Webb murmured in amazement. "Those claws could shred titanium, but it's touching our things like they're made of glass." The dragon had been examining each item with intense curiosity, its massive head moving close enough to study fine details without ever making contact that might damage the delicate human-made objects. When it encountered a violin, the creature had spent nearly an hour producing soft, harmonic tones that seemed to be testing how the instrument would resonate with its own vocalizations. "It's been a guardian for so long that being careful is second nature," Sarah observed. "Everything it does is calculated to avoid causing harm. Even its breathing is controlled to prevent creating air currents that might disturb our display." Admiral Harrison joined them at the window, carrying a thick folder of reports and recommendations from various departments throughout the fleet. "The linguistics team has made remarkable progress," he announced. "The harmonic language appears to be incredibly sophisticated. Each tone carries multiple layers of meaning, and the dragon can convey complex concepts through subtle variations in frequency and duration." Sarah nodded, not surprised by the revelation. Her brief mental contact with the dragon had given her a glimpse of its intelligence, and she understood now that they were dealing with a being whose cognitive abilities might exceed human capabilities in ways they were only beginning to understand. "What about the diplomatic protocols?" she asked. "Has the Council made a decision about formal recognition?" Harrison's expression grew complicated. "That's actually why I'm here. The Council has voted to recognize the dragon as a sapient being and potential ally, but there's a complication. The dragon's presence has attracted attention from other species." Sarah felt a chill of concern. "What kind of attention?" "Long-range sensors have detected 3 ships approaching our position. The vessels don't match any known human or allied configurations. They're still several days out, but their trajectory suggests they're specifically heading for this research station." Webb frowned. Could they be the dragon's people, survivors coming to investigate what happened to their guardian? "That's one possibility," Harrison said grimly. "But there's another explanation that has the tactical team worried. The ships are heavily armed, and their approach pattern suggests they're not coming here for a peaceful reunion." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If the dragon had been serving as some kind of protector for its people, then its absence from their territory might have been noticed by hostile forces. Species that had perhaps been held in check by the dragon's presence, waiting for an opportunity to move into formerly protected space. "We need to tell the dragon," she said firmly. "If there's a threat approaching, it has a right to know, and if these are enemies of its people, then it might be able to help us understand what we're facing." Harrison looked uncertain. Captain, we're talking about potentially involving an alien being in human military decisions. The legal and ethical implications alone. Admiral, Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of new understanding, I don't think we have a choice. When I made contact with the dragon, I felt something. A connection, a responsibility. I think when its people were lost, when it became the last guardian of a dead civilization, something changed in its purpose. I think it's been waiting for new people to protect. The dragon's head turned toward the observation window, as if it had sensed their conversation. Its eyes met Sarah's through the reinforced transparent aluminum, and she felt that familiar echo of mental contact. The creature was indeed listening, and it understood far more than they had initially realized. There's something else, Webb said quietly. The medical scans from Sarah's contact session showed unusual neurological activity, not just in the dragon, but in Sarah as well. The connection they established appears to have been genuinely telepathic, at least at a basic level. Sarah felt her heart skip. She had suspected as much, but having it confirmed opened up possibilities that were both thrilling and terrifying. If she could communicate directly with the dragon, if she could share human concepts and receive alien understanding in return, then they might have a chance of coordinating their response to whatever was coming. I want to make contact again, she said. Full contact this time with the dragon's permission. If there's a threat approaching, we need to understand what we're dealing with, and we need to know if the dragon is willing to stand with us against it. Harrison considered this for a long moment. The tactical implications are significant. If the dragon is willing to ally with us, its capabilities could be the deciding factor in any conflict. But we're also talking about asking a being to potentially fight against its own species. Not its own species, Sarah corrected. Its people are gone. What's coming might be the same forces that destroyed the dragon's civilization in the first place. Enemies that it's been keeping at bay through its mere presence, but who now see an opportunity to expand into undefended territory. The dragon had moved closer to the observation window, its massive form radiating an alertness that hadn't been present since its rescue. When it began to vocalize, the harmonic tones carried an unmistakable note of urgency. It knows, Webb said in amazement. Somehow it knows about the approaching ships. Sarah was already moving toward the containment bay entrance. The connection goes both ways. When I touched its mind, it gained access to mine as well. It's been learning about human technology, human capabilities, human nature. And now it's probably sensing our concern about the approaching threat. Captain, wait, Harrison called after her. If you're right about this connection, then what you're proposing could be dangerous. We don't know the full extent of telepathic contact with an alien species. There could be psychological risks, permanent changes to your brain chemistry. Sarah paused at the entrance to the containment bay. Admiral, with respect, we're potentially facing a military threat from an unknown alien species. The dragon might be our only hope of understanding what's coming and how to defend against it. Whatever risks I might face from telepathic contact are insignificant compared to the risk of going into battle blind. The authorization came through in minutes, bypassed through emergency protocols that prioritized immediate threats over long-term safety considerations. Sarah entered the containment bay to find the dragon waiting for her, its massive head lowered to a comfortable height for human contact. You know what's happening, don't you? Sarah said as she approached. You can sense the approaching ships. The dragon's response came not in vocalizations, but in a direct touch of minds, as Sarah placed her hands against its warm scales. The contact was deeper this time, more complete, and through it Sarah experienced a flood of alien memories and knowledge. She saw the dragon's people as they had been in their prime, a civilization that spanned multiple star systems and maintained peace through the protection of beings like her companion. Guardians who served not as rulers, but as shields, defending younger species from threats they couldn't yet handle on their own. She saw the slow decline of that civilization, not through war or disaster, but through a gradual loss of purpose as their protected species grew strong enough to defend themselves. The dragons had become obsolete, their ancient duty fulfilled through the very success of their guardianship. And she saw the aftermath, the dragon empires withdrawing from galactic politics, their guardians taking on solitary vigils over abandoned territories. Most had eventually followed their people into whatever transcendent existence dragons achieved when their time was done. But a few had remained, maintaining their watch over empty space, preventing hostile forces from claiming what had once been protected ground. Her dragon had been one of those last sentinels, and the approaching ships belonged to a species that had been waiting decades for the Guardians to finally abandon their posts. When the connection ended, Sarah found herself on her knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what she had experienced. The dragon's massive head remained close to her, providing support and comfort as she processed the implications of what she had learned. "The Razaketh," she whispered, the alien name coming to her through the shared memories. "They're called the Razaketh, and they're nothing like us. They don't explore or trade or build. They consume. They find young civilizations and strip everything of value before moving on to the next target." Through the observation window, she could see Dr. Webb frantically taking notes as her words were transmitted to the monitoring team. This was intelligence that could save not just the research station, but potentially human civilization itself. "Your people held them back for centuries," she continued, still speaking to the dragon. "Your mere presence was enough to make them look elsewhere for prey, but now they think the Guardians are gone and humanity looks like an easy target." The dragon began to vocalize again, but this time the harmonics were different. Not the grief songs Sarah had heard before, but something that sounded like determination, like purpose being reborn. "You'll help us," she said, and it wasn't a question. Through their connection, she could feel the dragon's resolve forming. Its people might be gone, but here was a new species in need of protection. A young civilization with potential for growth, but lacking the experience to recognize the true nature of the threat approaching them. The dragon's response came through both telepathic contact and harmonic song, a communication so rich with meaning that Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. Yes, it would help. More than that, it would teach. Humanity would learn not just how to survive the coming battle, but how to take their place as guardians themselves, protecting other young species as they ventured out among the stars. Standing slowly, Sarah placed her hand against the dragon's forehead one more time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing us, for giving us a chance to prove we're worth protecting." The dragon's reply echoed through her mind long after the telepathic contact ended, a promise that resonated with the weight of ancient duty and new hope. "Together, we stand watch." The transformation of the research station from scientific facility to military command center happened with remarkable speed. Within 6 hours of Sarah's telepathic contact with the dragon, every department was working around the clock to prepare for the approaching Razaketh fleet. But the preparations were unlike anything in human military history, because they were being guided by an intelligence that had been fighting this particular enemy for millennia. Sarah found herself serving as the primary interpreter between the dragon and the human command staff, a role that required her to maintain almost constant telepathic contact with their alien ally. Each session left her emotionally and physically drained, but the knowledge she gained was invaluable. "The Razaketh ships aren't designed for prolonged combat," she explained to the assembled tactical team, her voice hoarse from hours of briefing sessions. "They're raiders, optimized for quick strikes against targets that can't effectively fight back. Their strategy depends on overwhelming initial attacks followed by resource extraction operations." Admiral Harrison studied the star charts spread across the conference table, now marked with projected attack vectors based on the dragon's intelligence. "What are their typical force compositions?" Sarah closed her eyes, reaching out to touch the dragon's mind across the distance that separated the conference room from the containment bay. The response came immediately, accompanied by detailed tactical memories that made her stomach clench with their brutal efficiency. 3 to 5 ships per raid, usually. The lead vessel is heavily armed but lightly shielded, designed to punch through defensive perimeters quickly. The support ships focus on troop transport and resource harvesting. They don't expect resistance from their targets. "How do they typically respond when they encounter serious opposition?" asked Commander Torres, the station's head of security. The answer came with a wave of grim satisfaction from the dragon's memories. "They retreat. The Razaketh are predators, not warriors. When they encounter prey that can actually hurt them, they usually withdraw to find easier targets. But they'll test us first, probing our defenses to see if we're truly capable of fighting back." Dr. Webb looked up from his tablet, where he had been frantically documenting everything Sarah reported. "The dragon's people, how did they typically deal with Razaketh incursions?" Sarah's connection with the dragon deepened, drawing her into memories that were both beautiful and terrible. She saw massive space battles where single dragons faced entire fleets, their natural abilities enhanced by technology that seemed like magic to human understanding. She saw guardianships that moved like living creatures, responding to their dragon pilots with an intimacy that no human technology could match. "They didn't fight them directly," she said finally. "Not usually. The dragon's presence was enough of a deterrent that the Razaketh rarely attempted raids on protected territories. When they did attack, a single guardian could usually drive them off without significant casualties on either side." "One dragon against multiple ships," Harrison sounded skeptical. "How is that possible?" The answer required Sarah to delve deeper into the dragon's memories than she had ever gone before. What she found there changed her understanding of what dragons really were, and what their partnership with humanity might actually mean. "They're not just intelligent creatures," she said slowly, her voice filled with awe. "They're living weapons. Their scales can deflect energy weapons, their breath can disrupt electronics across huge distances, and they can survive in vacuum indefinitely. But more than that, they have abilities we don't have words for. They can sense hostile intentions across space, predict attack patterns before they're implemented, and somehow interfere with the decision-making processes of enemy crews." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just allying with an alien intelligence. They were partnering with a being whose capabilities bordered on the supernatural by human standards. "Our dragon is willing to face the Razaketh fleet directly," Sarah continued. "But it wants us to understand that this isn't just about driving off one raid. This is about proving that humanity is capable of becoming guardians ourselves, that we can take responsibility for protecting other species as they develop." Admiral Harrison leaned back in his chair, the weight of galactic responsibility settling on his shoulders. "So this is a test. The dragon is evaluating whether we're worthy of inheriting its people's role as protectors." Sarah nodded. "And the Razaketh are evaluating whether we're worth the effort to destroy. If we can't mount an effective defense, they'll classify human space as easy hunting grounds and start planning larger invasions. If we prove ourselves too dangerous to attack casually, they'll look elsewhere for prey." The next 12 hours were spent in intensive preparation. The dragon, now formally recognized as an allied entity rather than a research subject, was moved to a specialized bay that could open directly to space. The creature's eagerness to participate in the coming battle was obvious to everyone who observed it, but there was something else in its behavior that took Sarah some time to identify. The dragon was excited. "It's been alone for so long," she explained to Dr. Webb as they watched the creature test its mobility in the expanded space. "Maintaining a solitary vigil over empty territory with no one to protect and no real purpose. Now it has both. It has us to guard, and it has the chance to teach us how to guard others." "Are you certain it won't be overwhelmed by 3 ships?" Webb asked. "I know you've shared its memories of past battles, but those were fought with the support of dragon technology. Our ally will be facing the Razaketh with only its natural abilities." Sarah reached out telepathically to the dragon, sharing Webb's concern and receiving a response that was both reassuring and humbling. "It says that fighting without technological enhancement will actually be easier in some ways. Dragon ships were powerful, but they were also complex. Natural dragon abilities are simpler, more direct, and much harder for enemies to predict or counter." When the Razaketh fleet finally arrived, their approach was exactly as the dragon had predicted. 3 ships, moving in a formation designed to overwhelm defensive positions through concentrated firepower. They decelerated from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and began a careful approach, scanning for defensive installations and fleet concentrations. What they found instead was a single human research station, and what their sensors probably identified as a large biological anomaly. "They're confused," Sarah reported from her position in the command center, maintaining constant telepathic contact with the dragon as it waited in the launch bay. "They're not reading any significant defensive systems, but they can't understand what the dragon is. Their scanners aren't designed to analyze living targets of that size." The Razaketh approach slowed as the alien commanders tried to decide how to classify the threat. Through the dragon's enhanced senses, Sarah could feel their uncertainty, their instinctive fear of something that didn't fit their understanding of how prey species were supposed to behave. "They're going to send a probe ship," she announced. Single vessel, minimal crew, designed to test our response without risking significant resources. Admiral Harrison nodded grimly, and that's when our Dragon makes its introduction. The launch bay doors opened silently, releasing the Dragon into the vacuum of space. Watching through external cameras, Sarah was struck by how naturally the creature moved in the airless environment. Its massive form twisted and turned with impossible grace, each movement perfectly calculated to achieve maximum velocity with minimum effort. The approaching Razaketh probe ship was roughly the size of a human destroyer, bristling with weapons and scanning equipment. Its crew had probably participated in dozens of raids against helpless colonies, secure in their knowledge that no single entity could threaten a properly armed military vessel. They were about to receive a comprehensive education in how wrong that assumption could be. The Dragon's first attack came without warning, a focused beam of energy that seemed to originate from deep within its chest. The beam struck the probe ship's shields and simply passed through them as if they weren't there, disrupting electronics and causing cascade failures throughout the vessel's systems. "How is that possible?" Commander Torres breathed, watching the displays as the enemy ship went dark. Sarah felt the Dragon's amusement through their telepathic link. Razaketh shields are designed to deflect physical projectiles and standard energy weapons. They've never encountered Dragon Breath, which operates on frequencies their technology can't detect or defend against. The probe ship was now tumbling helplessly, its crew probably trying to understand what had just happened to their supposedly impregnable defenses. The Dragon approached the disabled vessel with casual confidence, its massive claws delicately gripping the ship's hull. What happened next would have been impossible for any human technology to achieve. Instead of destroying the probe ship, the Dragon began to sing. The harmonic frequencies penetrated the vessel's hull and somehow reached the crew inside. Through the telepathic link, Sarah felt what the Razaketh were experiencing as the Dragon's song invaded their minds. Terror, yes, but also something deeper. Understanding. Recognition of a power they had forgotten could exist. "It's communicating with them," Sarah reported, her voice filled with wonder. "Not threatening or interrogating, it's teaching, showing them what they've really stumbled into, what kind of force they're considering attacking." The Dragon's song carried images and concepts that transcended language barriers. The history of the Guardian civilization, the true scope of protected space, and the consequences that awaited any species foolish enough to prey upon developing worlds under Dragon protection. When the song ended, the probe ship systems came back online. But instead of resuming their attack approach, the vessel immediately began broadcasting a retreat signal to the rest of the Razaketh fleet. "They're leaving," Admiral Harrison said in amazement. "All 3 ships, they're actually withdrawing without firing a shot." Sarah felt the Dragon's satisfaction as it released the probe ship and watched the Razaketh fleet turn away from human space. But underneath that satisfaction was something deeper. Pride. The Dragon was proud of humanity's response to the crisis, proud of their willingness to work with an alien ally, and proud of the potential it saw in their species. "The test isn't over," Sarah announced as the Dragon began its return to the research station. "This was just the beginning. Word of what happened here will spread through Razaketh space and beyond. Other species will come to investigate to see if the rumors of a new Guardian civilization are true." "Are we ready for that?" Harrison asked. Sarah smiled, feeling the Dragon's confidence flowing through their mental connection. "We're learning, and we have an excellent teacher." As the Dragon re-entered the launch bay, Sarah realized that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer just another young species trying to find its place among the stars. They were apprentice guardians, learning to protect others as they themselves had been protected. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place. 6 months after the Razaketh encounter, the research station had been transformed into something entirely unprecedented in human history. No longer a simple scientific outpost, it had become the hub of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic mission, housing representatives from 12 different species, and serving as the unofficial capital of what galactic civilization had begun calling the New Guardian Protectorate. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the station's newest addition, a massive diplomatic quarter designed to accommodate the wildly varied environmental needs of their alien guests. Through the transparent aluminum walls, she could see 3 different atmospheric zones, each tailored to support species that had evolved under completely different conditions. The changes went far beyond architecture. The dragon, now known throughout local space by the name Zephyros, had proven to be not just humanity's ally but their teacher in the complex art of galactic diplomacy. Under its guidance, humanity was learning to navigate relationships with species whose psychology, biology, and social structures defied human understanding. The delegation from Kepler 438b has requested a formal audience, Dr. Webb announced as he joined Sarah at the observation window. His role had evolved from xenobiologist to humanity's first ambassador to non-human civilizations, a position that required him to understand not just alien biology but alien politics. "What's their situation?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. The pattern had become familiar over the past months, as word of the new Guardian Protectorate spread through civilizations that had long lived under the threat of predator species. Classic protection request. They're a peaceful trading culture that's been suffering raids from the Vorthan Collective. Their technology is advanced enough to support interstellar commerce, but they've never developed military capabilities sufficient to defend themselves against organized piracy. Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility that came with their new role. Through her telepathic link with Zephyros, she could sense the dragon's evaluation of each request for protection. Not all were granted. The Guardian philosophy required careful assessment of each species' readiness for protection, their potential for growth, and their commitment to eventually protecting others in turn. Has Zephyros completed its assessment? Webb consulted his tablet, reviewing the complex psychological and cultural analysis that the dragon performed on every species that requested Guardian protection. Provisional approval. The Kepler 438b civilization shows strong potential for developing their own Guardian capabilities within a few generations. Zephyros believes they would eventually become effective protectors for younger species in their region. That was the key insight that had revolutionized human understanding of galactic civilization. The ancient dragons hadn't simply protected weaker species out of altruism. They had been cultivating future guardians, nurturing civilizations that would eventually take on the responsibility of protecting others. It was a vast, multi-generational project aimed at creating a galaxy where aggression was contained, and younger species were given the chance to develop in peace. Schedule the audience for tomorrow, Sarah decided, and make sure the Vorthan situation is addressed before they can mount another major raid. Zephyros has been eager for the opportunity to demonstrate Guardian techniques to a wider audience. Webb smiled grimly. The dragon's confrontations with pirate fleets had become legendary throughout local space, not for their violence, but for their elegant efficiency. Zephyros had perfected the art of neutralizing hostile forces without causing unnecessary casualties, using a combination of telepathic influence, technological disruption, and sheer intimidating presence to convince aggressors that their chosen lifestyle was both unprofitable and dangerous. "There's something else," Webb said, his expression becoming more serious. "Long-range sensors have detected an approach by something much larger than we've dealt with before. Initial scans suggest it's a diplomatic vessel from the old core worlds, possibly representing one of the ancient civilizations that worked directly with the original Dragon Guardians." Sarah felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. Contact with the elder civilizations had been inevitable once humanity began taking on Guardian responsibilities, but it represented a test of an entirely different magnitude than dealing with raiders and younger species. How long until they arrive? 4 days, assuming they maintain their current approach vector. Admiral Harrison has called for a full diplomatic protocol review. If these are representatives of one of the founding Guardian civilizations, then how we handle this contact could determine humanity's standing in galactic civilization for centuries to come. Sarah made her way to the meditation chamber that had been constructed specifically for her telepathic sessions with Zephyros. The dragon had insisted on the facility after observing how their mental connections affected her physiology, recognizing that sustainable telepathic communication required proper environmental support and recovery time. She found Zephyros waiting in the chamber's center, the dragon's massive form coiled in a position that somehow managed to appear both relaxed and alert. The creature's scales had grown more lustrous over the months, their color shifts now displaying subtle patterns that Sarah had learned to read as indicators of mood and intention. "You've sensed the approaching ship," Sarah said as she settled into her customary position beside the dragon's head. It wasn't a question. Their telepathic bond had grown strong enough that Zephyros often knew her thoughts before she fully formed them. Indeed, came the dragon's mental voice, accompanied by harmonics that carried layers of meaning no human language could express. They come to evaluate our success, to determine whether humanity truly understands what it means to be guardians. Sarah opened her mind fully to the telepathic connection, allowing Zephyros to share its memories of the elder civilizations. What she saw filled her with both wonder and trepidation. Species that had transcended physical limitations millennia ago, beings of pure thought and energy who maintained the galaxy's underlying structure through means that bordered on divine intervention. They are the architects of guardian civilization, Zephyros explained, its mental voice resonating with ancient respect. My people were their first students, their proof that guardian philosophy could work across different species and evolutionary paths. Now they come to see if that same philosophy can take root in humanity. What will they be looking for? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer through their shared connection. The dragon's response came not in words, but in a flood of sensory impressions and emotional concepts. The elder beings would evaluate humanity's treatment of weaker species, their willingness to make sacrifices for others' protection, and most critically, their ability to cultivate guardian instincts in other civilizations. They will test our students, Zephyros clarified, not us directly, but those we have chosen to protect and guide. If humanity's wards show proper development toward guardian responsibility, then our success will be acknowledged. If they remain dependent and passive, then our experiment will be judged a failure. Sarah understood the implications immediately. The 12 species currently under human protection weren't just allies or dependents. They were humanity's thesis project in guardian philosophy. Their development would determine whether humanity was accepted into the community of elder guardians or dismissed as another failed attempt at transcendent responsibility. The Kepler 438b delegation, she realized. Their request for protection isn't just about defending themselves from pirates. It's an opportunity to demonstrate that we can guide a species toward eventual guardian status. Precisely, and the approaching test will reveal whether we have succeeded in that guidance with our existing wards. Over the following days, the station buzzed with preparation for what would essentially be humanity's final examination as guardian candidates. Representatives from all 12 protected species were briefed on what was at stake, though the full implications were shared only with those whose development had progressed furthest toward guardian readiness. The elder ship, when it finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, defied every expectation Sarah had formed. Rather than the massive technological marvels she had anticipated, the vessel appeared to be constructed entirely of crystalline material that seemed to grow and reshape itself as she watched. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to perceive directly, as if human vision wasn't sophisticated enough to process its true appearance. "No response to our communication attempts," reported Commander Torres from the bridge. "The ship is maintaining position at exactly the edge of our sensor range, but showing no signs of aggressive intent." Sarah didn't need sensors to know what was happening. Through her link with Zephyros, she could feel the elder beings conducting their evaluation, not through technology or direct observation, but through some form of awareness that penetrated to the core of every consciousness in the system. They are reading the intentions and development of every protected species, Zephyros explained, its mental voice carrying notes of profound concentration. Measuring the growth of guardian instincts, evaluating the sustainability of protective relationships, determining whether humanity's students will eventually become teachers themselves. The evaluation lasted 3 days, during which normal station operations continued, but everyone felt the weight of invisible observation. Sarah spent most of the time in deep telepathic communion with Zephyros, serving as humanity's voice in whatever cosmic conversation was taking place between the dragon and the elder beings. When the evaluation finally ended, Sarah found herself experiencing something unprecedented in her relationship with Zephyros. For the first time since their initial contact, she felt the dragon's uncertainty. "The judgment is complex," Zephyros admitted, its mental voice carrying unusual hesitation. "Humanity shows exceptional promise as guardians, but your approach differs significantly from traditional methods. The elder beings must decide whether this represents positive evolution or dangerous deviation. What do you mean by different approach? The dragon's response came with a cascade of comparative images, showing how previous guardian species had developed. Most had followed predictable patterns, growing from protected wards to protective guardians over the course of many generations, always maintaining the hierarchical structure that placed elder beings at the apex of galactic civilization. Humanity, however, had begun developing something unprecedented: collaborative guardianship. Rather than simply protecting weaker species, humans had begun forming genuine partnerships with their wards, sharing technology and knowledge in ways that accelerated development far beyond traditional timelines. You seek to create equals, not perpetual dependence, Zephyros observed. This could revolutionize guardian civilization, or it could destabilize the careful balance that has maintained galactic peace for millennia. The answer came at the end of the third day, not through technological communication, but through a direct telepathic message that somehow reached every conscious being in the system simultaneously. The elder being's judgment was delivered in concepts that transcended language, carrying the weight of cosmic authority. Humanity was accepted as guardian candidates, but under unprecedented conditions. They would be permitted to continue their experimental approach to guardian philosophy, but under careful observation. If their methods proved successful, they would revolutionize how galactic civilization approached protection and development. If they failed, they would be removed from guardian status and returned to the ranks of protected species. The trial period would last 1,000 years. As the elder ship departed, leaving behind only the memory of its crystalline beauty, Sarah found herself overwhelmed by the magnitude of what humanity had undertaken. They weren't just protecting a handful of species. They were potentially reshaping the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. "Are you afraid?" Zephyros asked gently, sensing her emotional turmoil. Sarah considered the question carefully, looking out at the diplomatic quarter where representatives of 12 species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under traditional guardian hierarchy. She thought about the collaborative research stations they were building, the joint defense networks being developed, and the shared cultural exchanges that were already producing unprecedented innovations. "No," she said finally, "not afraid, excited. We have a chance to prove that guardianship doesn't have to mean domination, that protection can be the foundation for true equality among species." Zephyros' response resonated with warmth and something that might have been hope. "Then let us begin. We have 1,000 years to change the galaxy, and I can think of no species better suited to the task." Looking out at the stars, Sarah smiled. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds and unlimited potential. Now they had both, along with the greatest teacher in the galaxy, and the chance to write a new chapter in the cosmic story of civilization. The real adventure was just beginning.